The Albanese government is hardening its language in response to President Trump's decision to impose tariffs on Australia. Overnight, US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick called out Australia amongst America's enemies on trade.
And we're not going to stand for China dumping, Japan dumping. Australia does a lot of aluminum at below cost. I mean, this has got to end, and the president is on it, and he's protecting America.
Ambassador and former PM Kevin Rudd has been working around the clock to change the administration's position, including 3 recent meetings with Secretary Lutnick. But Rudd says Australia faces a new implacable America. He joined me earlier from Washington. Ambassador Rudd, welcome to 7:30.
Good to be back on the program, Sarah.
You were meeting with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in the lead-up to the announcement on the tariffs. Was he listening to Australia's arguments?
Well, I think it's really important, Sarah, just to step back a little bit and understand that the America we're dealing with since the 20th of January is a vastly different America from the past, and in fact, significantly different from the period of Trump 1.0, the first Trump administration. This administration is more nationalist on questions of foreign policy, more protectionist on trade policy, and much more transactional in its overall approach to international negotiations. We've seen that very much reflected in the way in which the administration's approached these tariff negotiations as well. These are deep-seated, fundamental changes in this different America, which every one of the 36 countries who negotiated tariff exemptions on steel and aluminium last time round back in 2017 have had to contend with this time round. You're right to say that with Secretary Lutnick, I've had considerable and ongoing discussions right through the end of last week, in fact starting a little earlier than that, and through into the early days of this week. These have been straightforward, hard, direct, and I think the Secretary understands full well Australia's negotiating position, which is we are long-standing free trade partners with the United States. We impose 0 tariffs against any American export. We've never had a trade surplus with America, and on top of that, America has a 2-to-1 surplus against us. Those arguments, at this stage at least, have not prevailed.
What was the atmosphere like in the room during those meetings?
Well, remember these Lutnick negotiations as Secretary of Commerce have come on the back of a whole process kicked off by the Prime Minister's conversations with the President on the telephone day after he got elected, and again last month in February, where he laid out the framework for our negotiations on tariffs and trade. And since then, we've had a series of negotiations involving Ministers Wong, Minister Chalmers, the Treasurer, as well as myself and the embassy team. The Lutnick negotiations are probably one round of about 10 sets of discussions we've had right across the US system. With Secretary Lutnick, who very much now carries the President's mandate, however, it's been tough, direct, himself asserting this new Trumpian worldview that I referred to before, which is America will be hardline and transactional in its approach, even to long-standing friends, partners and allies. So it's been tough and hard, but we have delivered our arguments as equally firmly back. So far, they haven't prevailed on this. We'll continue in these discussions for a long time to come. We're Australian, we don't give up that easily.
I want to ask you about the phone calls. Why wouldn't President Trump take a follow-up call from Anthony Albanese in the lead up to the announcement?
As I said before, Sarah, the entire framework for these 10 sets of meetings with a whole range of cabinet secretaries, including Secretary Lutnick, was laid out in that first telephone call just last month between the President and the Prime Minister, where the PM made our core arguments and then commissioned a process. And so the bottom line is, as we got to the end of this negotiating process, at least at this stage, in this rapid series of meetings starting at the end of last week with the Commerce Secretary, Secretary Lutnick, I formed the judgment that it was then useful to make a further request for a further follow-up call by the Prime Minister with the President. And by the time the decision was taken, however, on Tuesday of this week, late Tuesday, we had not been able to secure that time. But frankly, remember this, 36 other countries, if all these interventions from other governments, either through telephone calls in some cases, even the odd visit, such as the British Prime Minister, was not able to deliver outcomes on steel and aluminium for them, I think it stands to reason we should question whether, in fact, even this request for a late telephone call would have necessarily made a material difference. We're up against a deep ideological, strategic view of this Trump administration that they intend not to produce qualifications from the positions on tariffs that they undertook in the last administration because of their deep view of their relationship with the rest of the world and the global economy.
The opposition leader, Peter Dutton, says that if he were Prime Minister, he would be able to get an exemption. What do you say to that? Mr Dutton obviously is participating in the domestic Australian political debate. I'm not going to be in the business of commenting on the Leader of the Opposition's views. What I can say here is that Team Australia, led by myself as Ambassador, have thrown everything at this since 20 January, the day of the inauguration. Over the last 6 or 7 weeks, I probably had a team of 20 government officials working on this. We've had 3 sets of government ministers in town, 2 sets of prime ministerial phone calls, but we're up against an administration which has a very deep-seated view that tariffs are the way to the future. We disagree with that view, but I'm simply describing the reality, and that therefore their relationship is not going to be a replication of the first Trump administration. It's going to be much harder line. But we don't intend to give up. We're Australian. In an interview overnight, the Commerce Secretary Lutnick said that other sectors will face tariffs, including pharmaceuticals, which are a much bigger export to the US for Australia. How concerned are you that other parts of the Australian economy will face US tariffs?
Well, as I said earlier in this interview, we are very vigilant about where further reviews of American trade policy in the weeks and months ahead could land. This set of negotiations is not over yet with this new and highly protectionist America. In terms of individual sectors, I think it's premature to speculate. We're working our way through that with US officials, but this is a very hard-fought set of negotiations which have already been had, and there are more hard-fought negotiations which lie ahead.
Critical minerals have been raised as being an important part of these negotiations, so what role exactly are they playing?
Australia has a range of advantages to bring to the table on the question of how to assist the United States given certain of its own national strategic vulnerabilities. You may recall Prime Minister Albanese with President Biden a couple of years ago agreed on a critical minerals compact with that administration to up Australia's level of supply. We can do the same with this administration. If you do the maths, it's pretty interesting. America designates itself as having 50 categories of critical minerals which it needs for the future, 50 priority categories. They see themselves as being vulnerable in 12 of those, and they are import dependent in 40 of those. For Australia, if you look at those 50, we are currently supplying 28 and can supply 36 of them. You see, Australia equals the periodic table. We also have the biggest and best mining companies in the world. So we stand ready to assist, as we did with the Biden administration. We didn't get there in the end with them, but of course that remains on the table from us also with this administration. We are uniquely positioned to be able to do this.
Ambassador Rudd, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you on the program.